The light had been going for 11 years before anyone on the Conclave ships noticed it was still on. Marla Nunder had not noticed them noticing. She was busy with the lamp. The lamp was not a lamp in any conventional sense. It had started as one back when the station was built, a coastal warning beacon perched on the skin of Relay Point 7, a tumbling asteroid 300 kilometers wide that had been mined hollow, half terraformed, and then abandoned when the Terragenic Corporation decided the returns were insufficient. The lamp had been left running. No one had thought to turn it off. Marla had arrived 6 years later on a supply tug that didn't have enough fuel to leave, and she had found the lamp and she had kept it going because, she told her brother in her nightly transmissions, a light that has been going ought to keep going. Her brother Maxie was 12 years younger than her. He lived on what remained of the Ganymede habitats, cramped cylinder blocks with fogged viewports, and recycled air that smelled like the inside of a thermos. And every night, at whatever time approximated night in their respective positions, he would call her on the relay band, and she would read to him. Stories, old ones mostly, the kind with lighthouses in them, and storms, and narrow escapes. The dog's name was Pula. She was a border collie mix, with one ear that stood up, and one that folded down, and she had come on the same supply tug as Marla, because the tug's navigator had been unable to secure anyone to take her. Pula was 9 years old, in the 6th year of Marla's tenure at Relay Point 7, which made her old in the way that mattered, which was the way where you could see it in her eyes before you could see it anywhere else. She slept a lot, she ate less. She followed Marla through every corridor of the station, slower each month, and when Marla sat at the lamp console in the dome, Pula would curl under the chair and put her head on Marla's boot and breathe there, slow and warm, until one of them fell asleep. Maxie asked about Pula in every transmission. How's Pula? Not a question, exactly. More the way you say a name to keep it real. She's good, Marla said. She's here. That was the year the Conclave arrived. They did not arrive the way the old stories said invaders arrived, not with a roar or a shadow or a city-killing beam from the sky. They arrived the way a headache arrives, gradually and then all at once. First, the gravitational anomaly readings, strange, dense masses the tracking buoys couldn't account for. Then the calm blackouts, patchy at first, and then total, like someone was methodically switching off the lights of the solar system one band at a time. Then the shapes, visible even through Relay Point 7's scratched optical sensors, not ships exactly, more like reef formations made of something that was almost metal, vast and slow and deeply, profoundly wrong in the way that beautiful things can be wrong when you understand what they're doing. Marla cataloged them. She did not have much else to do, and it gave her hand something useful. She had no way to know then what she would later come to understand about the Conclave, that they were not conquerors in any sense a human would recognize. Conquest implies the conquered thing has value. The Conclave's relationship to other life was closer to maintenance. They managed, culled, redirected. They had been doing it for 600,000 years across 11 star systems, and they were very good at it, and they were also very bored. Their language, to the extent that Marla was eventually able to parse any of it, was not composed of sounds. It was composed of the absence of sounds, precise silences within electromagnetic noise, meaningful pauses, the shape carved by what was not there. She spent 2 years trying to understand it before she understood enough to realize what she was hearing in those silences. Boredom, mostly. The deep bovine indifference of a civilization that had been doing the same thing for longer than recorded human history. She made tea. Maxie's transmissions had become irregular. The blackouts were spreading, but they still came through, bounced off the lamp's relay array in fragments that Marla's systems stitched back together. She read him the story about the lighthouse keeper and the storm. She read him the one about the brothers who found the whale. She read him one she made up as she went about a distant planet where the skies were green and everyone played chess all day and drank things that tasted like winter. What kind of chess? Maxie asked. The good kind. The kind where you take a long time with each move. And the drinks? Sparkling, cold. They come in tall glasses with very thin stems and you have to hold them carefully or they tip. I'd knock mine over, he said. No, you wouldn't. You'd learn. The Conclave's first direct communication came on a Tuesday, though Marla had stopped caring about Tuesdays some years back. It came through as a structured silence in the relay band, which her system flagged as anomalous and she read as intentional, and which, after 40 hours of analysis, she was able to translate into something approximate. A question, or the shape of a question, Something in the register of what function maintains the emission. The emission was the lamp. Marla thought about this for a long time. She sat at the console with Pulla's head on her boot, and she looked at the lamp, turning slowly in its mount, the way it had been turning for 11 years. Its beam swept the dark in a regular arc, 4 seconds from peak to peak, and it broadcast on 17 frequencies simultaneously, and it did not do much that was practically useful anymore. The shipping lanes it had been built to guide were long since abandoned, but it had been going for 11 years, and it seemed wrong to stop it. She transmitted back. She had no silence language to work with, so she used the lamp itself. She pulsed it. A dot, a dash, a dot, Morse. The letter R for relay. For the old word, the human one, that meant message received and understood, pass it on. There was a long silence after that, 22 days of silence. Then the conclave moved 3 of their reef ships into closer orbit around relay point 7, and Marla understood that she had said something interesting, even if she did not know what. Pulla died in the 8th month of the conclave's presence. It was not dramatic. She had been sleeping under the console chair, and Marla had been working through a new translation matrix. And at some point she reached down to feel the familiar warmth of Pulla's head, and it was there, but it was still. And the breathing that had been the background noise of Marla's last 6 years was gone. She sat with her for a long time. She told her she was a good dog. She told her she was the best dog. She said it out loud because she believed it was important to say the things you believed out loud when you had the chance. And then she carried Pulla to the small airlock at the station's aft end, and she released her into space, which was the only burial relay point 7 had to offer. And she watched the small dark shape of her recede against the stars until she couldn't see her anymore. She called Maxie that night. He had known, somehow, the way he sometimes knew things before she said them, the way siblings do across distances when they've been talking every night for years. "Tell me about the chess planet," he said. "Tell me more about it." So she did. She said the planet was very far away, in a system that was hard to find, that it orbited a sun that was slightly too orange and slightly too close, so the days were long and warm and slow. She said the people there were not in a hurry about anything. She said they played chess in open plazas with big stone pieces, and you moved them with a long pole that you kept balanced against your shoulder, like a shepherd's crook, and you could take hours to decide, and no one minded. She said their drinks were distilled from something that grew in the craters of their moon, a red-leafed plant that was sweet and cold and faintly carbonated on its own, naturally, without any intervention, because the planet had decided to make something wonderful without being asked. "Is Pulla there?" Maxie asked. "Yeah," Marla said. "She got there before us. She's learning the chess." "Is she any good?" "She beats everyone," Marla said. "She's insufferable," Maxie laughed. It came through the relay in pieces, patched together, but it was still his laugh. The conclave's next communication arrived differently. Not a silence, a presence. A sustained low-frequency emission that Marla's system translated, after a week of processing, as approximately. Your emission records something not present. She thought about this for a long time. She thought it might be a statement. She thought it might be a question. She thought it might be the conclave's equivalent of what she had felt sitting on the floor of the aft corridor, with her hand on a body that was there but wasn't anymore. The strange double existence of loss, where the absence of a thing and the memory of a thing share the same space. She pulsed back. ... S for signal. 4, I am still here. The conclave ships moved closer. There were more of them now. 30, at her last count, though counting them was difficult, because they changed their configurations regularly, merging and separating in ways that made it unclear whether you were looking at one thing or many. They had made no aggressive moves. They had also made no retreats. They simply surrounded relay point 7 at a distance of approximately 40 kilometers and observed it, and, Marla increasingly believed, listened to the lamp. She had started doing things with the lamp beyond the simple pulsing. She had started telling it things. Not in code, not in Morse or any other transmission language. She would sit at the console and vary the lamp's output, frequency, duration, sweep speed, and let the variation carry what she was thinking about. It was not communication in any sense that could be decoded. It was more like music in the way that music is not a message but a state, a shape of feeling made external, offered out, not requiring reception. She told the lamp about Pulla. She told it about the chess planet, the stone pieces, the long pole, the crater leaf drinks in thin-stemmed glasses. She told it about Maxie, who was 31 now, and had taken up carpentry in the Ganymede habitats, who made small furniture that people were starting to want. She told it about herself, that she had been afraid when the conclave first arrived, but that the fear had changed into something else over the years, something she didn't have a word for, but which felt like respect for a thing very large and very old that was also, in its way, listening. On the 984th day of the conclave's presence, they responded. Not in silence this time, not in any frequency Marla had been monitoring. They responded through the lamp itself. She was asleep when it happened, sleeping in the chair, as she often did now, the console's light blue on her face, and the lamp's system alert woke her with a soft tone. She sat up. The lamp was still sweeping, but its output had changed. Not in the ways she had been varying it. In new ways, ways that preserved her original variations as a kind of bass rhythm and layered something over them. New frequencies, new durations, a second voice in counterpoint. She listened for a long time, her hands resting in her lap, not touching the console. Then she understood. Not the meaning, there was no meaning she could decode, but the gesture. The conclave had taken what she was putting out and answered it in kind. Not a message, a state, a shape of something that was theirs, offered out, not requiring reception. She thought, they are not managing us. They are studying us the way you study something you haven't seen before. The way you sit very still and don't move too quickly because you don't want to break the thing you're looking at. She thought, we look very strange to them. She thought, good. The transmissions from the inner system had stopped completely by then. The blackouts were total, the shipping lanes dark, the population of humanity reduced, from the perspective of Relay Point 7 to one channel. Maxie, coming through patched and fragmentary on the relay band, which the conclave had apparently decided to leave alone. Whether that was deliberate or oversight, Marla didn't know. She didn't ask. She was grateful, and she kept reading him stories. She had run out of old ones. She was making them up now, serialized, every night a new chapter. The chess planet, which she had been building for months, which had become very detailed in her mind. The crater leaf wine, the long games in the plaza, the orange-tinted days. The people who were not in a hurry, and who had decided, collectively, centuries ago, that winning was less interesting than the game itself. So they had altered their rules so that the goal was not to defeat your opponent, but to play for as long as possible, to keep both kings alive. That's not chess, Maxie said. It's their chess. What do they call it? She thought about it. Something that translates roughly as, the thing we do instead of the other things, Maxie laughed. I want to go there. You will. How do we get there? That's what I'm working on, Marla said. The conclave's shifts in behavior were subtle and cumulative. The reef ships moved slightly closer over a span of months. Their output frequencies began to mirror Marla's lamp variations more precisely, not just in counterpoint now, but in imitation, learning the rhythms, playing them back at her as if testing whether they had understood correctly. She would vary something, and they would reproduce it, then vary it themselves, then wait. She began to vary things in response to their variations. They were having a conversation. It had no content. It was entirely structural, the syntax without the words, the rhythm without the meaning, and it was the strangest conversation Marla had ever had, and it was also, she thought, the most honest, because neither of them could pretend they understood the other better than they did. The conclave added something new one morning, a steady, slow pulse underlying everything else, a heartbeat frequency. It wasn't biological. The conclave didn't have biology in any form Marla had been able to detect. They were something older than biology, something that had decided early to solve the problem of being alive through hardware rather than chemistry. But it was regular and it was warm in the electromagnetic sense, which was the only sense the lamp could read. And Marla left it running under her own outputs and listened to it and thought, this is what it is to have something pay attention. She had been afraid for so long that she hadn't noticed the fear had become something else. The day the fear finally shed its last skin was the day the conclave did something she had not predicted. One of the reef ships detached from the others and moved to a position directly in the lamp's sweep path, and it opened something, an aperture, a gap, a deliberate negative space in its structure, and the lamp's beam passed through it and was refracted and scattered across the dark in new shapes. Not random. The aperture was shaped. The scattered light made patterns on the surrounding dark like projected shadows, like the moving hands of a story told without words to a room full of children. Marla watched the patterns for 4 hours. She thought, They have been watching a light keep going for 11 years, and they have decided to become part of it, she thought. This is not maintenance. This is not culling. This is something the boredom made them do, something one of them, somewhere in those reef formations, came to feel and then acted on, the way a child acts on something they feel, without committee. She pulsed the lamp. ... Our message received and understood. Pass it on. The aperture widened. The pattern spread. She called Maxie that night with a steadier voice than she had used in months. Tell me about the chess, he said immediately. He always started there now. Tonight it's about the drinks, she said. Yeah? The crater leaf wine. It comes from this specific crater, the oldest one on the moon, the one that's been there since before the planet had life. And the vine grows down the crater walls, which are about 1 kilometer deep. So the leaves get this vertical gradient of temperature from top to bottom. The ones at the top are warm. They have a flavor like early summer. The ones at the bottom are cold. They taste like the first snow. And the way they make the wine, they don't pick from just one level. They pick from all of them, and they blend them. And what you get in the glass is the whole crater at once, from the day it formed to the day you're drinking it. Maxie was quiet for a moment. That sounds like something you'd want to drink slowly. They have a saying, Marla said. Something like, all at once is not the same as all of it. I need to write that down. The carpentry going okay? I made a chair this week that I actually like. What makes you like it? It balances right. When you sit in it, it feels like it was meant for you specifically, even though it wasn't. It feels like it was waiting. Marla was quiet for a moment. Through the dome's viewport, the conclave's aperture was still scattered with the lamp's light, still making its moving patterns, still showing the shadows of something that was almost like a story. How many do you make in a week? 2, 3. People want them. Keep making them, she said. Keep making things that feel like they were waiting. What are you making? She looked at the lamp. I'm making something for people I haven't met yet. The conclave's full communication came on the 1100th and 40th day. It was not the counterpoint anymore, not the shadow patterns. It was something new, and it arrived in a way that bypassed her instruments entirely. She felt it, the way you feel a very low bass note with your sternum rather than your ears. A vibration in the floor of the station, in the walls, in the soles of her boots. She did not panic. She had been afraid for too long. She had come out the other side of it into something flat and clear. She sat down. She breathed. She waited. The vibration resolved. Not into words, not into anything she could have described afterward with precision, into something she could only call a shape. The way a dream is a shape after you wake from it. You cannot recover the content, but you know the outline. You know the emotional temperature. You know what it was trying to tell you. What the conclave told her, in a vibration through the floor of a dead mining station on the skin of a hollow asteroid in the outer dark, was something in the approximate territory of, we have been doing this for a very long time, and we had stopped seeing it, and then your light was there, and you told it something, and we started seeing it again. She sat with this for a long time. Then she reached over and increased the lamp's output by 3%, which was as high as she could safely push it, and she switched it to a continuous sweep. No pulsing, no variation, just the clean, steady revolution of light through dark. And she said out loud to the station around her, and the conclave beyond it, and the space beyond them both, okay, then look. What followed was not peace in any political sense. The conclave was not a government with which you made treaties. They did not have provisions for humanity's independence or sovereignty or continued existence, not because they opposed these things, but because those were not categories they had ever thought about. Because, in 11 star systems over 600,000 years, they had never encountered something that held a light on for no reason, except that it had been going and ought to keep going. What followed was something more like the moment in a long story when two people who have been circling each other finally stop and look. The fleet in the inner system held its positions. The blackouts held. Humanity remained behind its dark curtain, cramped and frightened and alive. And Marla remained at relay point 7, and the lamp kept sweeping. But the conclave's 40 reef ships adjusted, not retreated, adjusted. They moved into new configurations around the lamp. Formations that, she noticed this over weeks, plotting their positions each morning, were not random. They were shaped to refract the lamp's beam differently each day. Some days broad and scattered, some days tight and concentrated, some days broken into dozens of separate paths that ran across the dark like the legs of something enormous and slow and curious. They were playing with the light. They were doing what children do with a candle in their hands, seeing what shapes they could make. On the 1207th day, something changed. A new frequency opened on the relay band, not a conclave frequency. The signature was wrong, too irregular, too messy, too unmistakably built by people who were figuring it out as they went. Marla spent 6 hours identifying the source, and when she had it, she put her forehead down on the console and breathed through her nose for a while before she sat back up and opened the channel. It was not Maxie. It was many voices, overlapping, patched together from 17 different relay points across what had been the shipping lanes, all of them broadcasting simultaneously, because whoever had figured out the new frequency had broadcast the method to everyone they could reach before trying it themselves. Marla listened. People were talking to each other, just talking. Not command structures, not strategic communications, not the carefully sanitized broadcast she'd been trained on. Just people in the dark having found a new way to reach across it, talking about, she parsed it slowly, disbelieving, talking about small things, what someone had built, what someone had grown, a joke someone's child had made, a dream someone had had about open water. She keyed her own transmission. She waited for a gap. She said her name and her location, and she said, because she believed it was important to say things out loud when you had the chance. The conclave is listening to the lamp. I think they're interested in us. I think we've been strange to them. I think strange is exactly what we should be. There was a long pause. Then someone said, have you been alone out there this whole time? No, she said. I had a dog, and I had my brother. Another pause. What did you tell the lamp? She thought about it. I told it about a planet that's very far away, where the days are long and warm, and everyone plays chess, and no one's in a hurry, and there's a wine made from crater vines that tastes like the whole history of the crater at once. Is that a real place? Not yet, she said. There was a long silence on the relay band. She watched the conclave's aperture ship holding position in the lamp's sweep path, the scattered light, making its patient moving shadows on the dark. Then someone else keyed in, and then someone else. And the frequency filled slowly, steadily, with voices talking about things they were building, and things they had lost, and things they intended to make when they had room to make them. And the conclave's vibration through the floor of the station held something that Marla translated, privately, as something close to. Yes, this is the thing we had stopped noticing. Go on. She reached down to where Pula's head had used to rest on her boot. The floor was warm there from the station's heating system. She left her hand there for a moment. Then she switched her comm to Maxie's channel. Hey, she said, I want to tell you about the chess planet. More of it? Different, she said. I want to tell you how you get there. He was quiet, which meant he was listening, which was the posture she knew best from him. Leaning forward, probably the way he had as a kid when she read to him across their parents' house in the dark. You get there, she said, by talking to things you don't understand, by keeping a light going when there's no practical reason to keep it going, by making things that feel like they were waiting for someone even when there's no one coming, by saying, here is what I see when I look up at the dark. Here is what I think about it. Here is what I feel. I'm not asking you to feel the same thing. I'm just telling you. That's how you get there? That's how you get anywhere, she said. That's how you always got anywhere. We just forgot. The conclave's configurations kept shifting, slow and patient, through the following weeks. New shapes every day, new refractions. Sometimes the patterns on the dark resolved into something almost recognizable. Geometries that hovered at the edge of meaning. Shapes that were close to letters or figures or diagrams and then weren't. And Marla stopped trying to decode them and started just watching them. The way you watch water, the way you watch fire, because some things are not messages and are better for it. The relay band filled and filled, voices building on voices. Someone in the Ganymede habitats had found a frequency the blackout didn't cover and was running a continuous music broadcast. Old music and new music tangled together. A carpenter's daughter who had started singing because there was nothing else to do, and had kept singing because it turned out she was very good at it. Her voice carried on the patched relay as clear as anything Marla had ever heard. The conclave listened. Their 40 ships became 50, then 60. Incoming, from farther out than anything Marla's sensors could previously reach. Reef formations she hadn't cataloged, drawn in by something she didn't have a word for. She recorded their arrivals. She kept the lamp going. On the 1402nd day, Maxie's transmission came through clear for the first time in 8 months. No patching, no fragments. His voice was clean and close and slightly amazed. The blackout's lifting, he said. Partially. Something's changing. I know, she said. What did you do? She looked at the lamp. I kept it going, she said. I just kept it going. That's all? That's all, she said. That's everything. She heard him breathe. She heard the background noise of the Ganymede habitats, recycled air, the distant percussion of people living close together, the thin texture of a human place. Tell me about the chess planet, he said. Again, from the beginning. So she started at the beginning. The orange sun slightly too close, the long warm days, the plaza with the stone pieces, the long-handled poles, the games that lasted weeks because no one was trying to end them. She told him about the crater leaf wine, the altitude gradient of flavor, the way they blended top to bottom and gave you the whole history of the crater in one glass. She told him about the nights, which were short and very clear, with a moon that showed its near side always hung in the sky, like a tilted coin, and which was covered in that red-leafed plant from rim to rim so that on clear nights you could look up and see the whole moon as a dim red lantern, as if someone had put a light on up there for no reason, except that a light that has been going ought to keep going. I want to go there, Maxie said. I know. Is it real? She watched the conclave's shadows move across the dark, patient and slow, making shapes that were almost something, that were the beginning of a language, that were the part before the words where the two sides of a conversation sit across from each other and decide that the gap between them is crossable. It's getting there, she said. The conclave's first deliberately intelligible signal arrived the following spring. Spring as Marla measured it. By the position of Jupiter in her viewport and a small solar-powered plant she kept on the console that she used to mark the seasons, a habit she had developed because she believed in marking the seasons even when no seasons were present, because the alternative was to stop believing the year was a circle. The signal was simple. A single clean pulse on a frequency they had not used before, a frequency Marla recognized after 12 hours of cross-referencing with the feeling of a door opening that you thought was a wall. It was the frequency of the lamp itself, the frequency the lamp had been broadcasting for 11 years, the first frequency they had ever detected from relay point 7. A pulse, 1 pulse, 4 seconds. Dot, she sat with it for a long time. She thought about dots, she thought about R, relay, message received, pass it on. She thought about the very first pulse she had sent, 11 years of lamp noise preceding it, and how it had been answered, not immediately but over years, not in the expected frequency but in a new one. Not with words, but with presence. She sent back 2 pulses. They sent back 3. She sent back 5. They sent back 8. She sat up straight. She sent back 13, 30 seconds, 40, 55 seconds of nothing. Then 21 pulses. Then 34. Then 55. Fibonacci, the oldest signal. The one mathematicians had proposed in the early days of the search. The one that said, whoever you are speaking to something that recognizes patterns and chooses to respond to them and is making an invitation by responding in the way it has, an invitation that means, we are trying a language. Do you want to try it with us? Marla laughed. She laughed the way you laugh when something is so perfectly absurd and so perfectly right at the same time that your body doesn't know what else to do. She laughed until her eyes were wet, and then she wiped her eyes and she keyed the relay band, the broad one now, the one with all the voices, and she said, listen, they just said hello. I'm going to say it back. She said it back. On the broad relay, she heard the voices go quiet. Then she heard something she hadn't expected. Not applause, not cheering, nothing so structured as that. Just a sound. A collective exhale. 2,000 kilometers of it. The sound of people in the dark letting out a breath they hadn't known they were holding. She sent 89 pulses. She sent 144. She sent 233, and the conclave matched her. And then she sent the next number in the sequence, 377. And she heard through the station's floor the deep, warm vibration that meant they were talking. That meant something in their vast, incomprehensible processing had shifted toward something she did not have a precise word for and settled on. Delight. Maxie, she said on his channel, quiet under everything else. I'm here. I think we're going to be okay. You've thought that before. This time I know it. She heard him shift. She heard the ambient sound of him in the habitats, familiar and close, the texture of him being alive, somewhere she could reach him. Tell me about the chess planet, he said. And then, before she could answer, no, tell me what's actually happening. Tell me what you see. She looked at the lamp. She looked at the reef ships in their slow configurations outside, making their shadows, playing with the light. She looked at the plant on her console, green and entirely ordinary, and precisely calibrated to the cycle of a year she had decided to keep believing in. I see a light that's been going for a long time, she said, and I see a lot of very old things that started paying attention to it. And I think the light is the answer. Not the answer to anything specific, just the answer, the thing you send out into the dark, the thing that says I am here and I notice things and I find them worth mentioning. I think that's what they've been looking for. I think they forgot what it looked like. And we showed them. We kept the light on, she said. They found the rest. The relay band went on all night, voices on top of voices, and the conclave's shadows moved and changed outside, and the lamp swept its clean 4-second arc through the dark. Marla left her hand on the console's edge. She thought about Pula on that distant planet learning the chess. She thought about crater leaf wine, the whole history of the crater in one glass. She thought about Maxie making chairs that felt like they were waiting. She thought, this is what it is to be human. Not the victory, not the cleverness, the stubbornness of the light, the refusal of the lamp to go out because it has been going, and it ought to keep going. The bedtime story told across distance, the names said aloud to keep them real. The game's played for the game and not the winning. She thought, they are 600,000 years old, and they had forgotten, we reminded them. Outside, in the dark, 377 pulses answered.